2021-11 regarding protection of historical memorials. So we and kind of need to refresh, if we haven't already, since we didn't meet in January, back in December. We sort of discussed the ordinance and the motion that we had made and decided we needed to pause and maybe rethink, regroup. Mr. Root gave us some more information and additional background and insight of this ordinance and the purpose. And I think where we are is we just need to decide if we want to leave the motion as we have left it or do we want to amend that motion? Is that?
So you've made a motion back in October, I put on your screen, to recommend the ordinance be amended to remove letter D of that section. Mr. Root came to the December meeting, had some discussion. You chose to push it forward. We did not meet in January, so that's the motion that's on the table now. And the commission is, you wanted to put it back on here one more time before we turned it loose, or have either more discussion or remain with the motion that was passed in October.
Okay, so then I guess I'll open it up to the commission for discussion, if there's any discussion at this point. I will just say that I appreciated Mr. Root coming in December and giving the additional insight. After the meeting, I went back and watched our prior meeting to kind of see where our thoughts were, where we made the motion. But I really feel like I have a better understanding that we, the commission, are not personally liable regarding, if there were missing items from this list, if it was, and that the purpose of the definitive list was to help enforcement of, and to be able to tell the public what actual memorials were covered, and that we are only serving in an advisory role. Which, that personally made me feel very comfortable with the ordinance as it was originally written. So, I know we made the motion and voted to remove letter D, which was the actual definitive list. But as I understand it, if we do nothing and this goes back then to the council, then they can decide whether to agree to it or to give us further direction. Is that?
It would depend on how you sent it back. So as it was before, the motion was to remove letter D, which was the development of a comprehensive list. So I would take that back to council, say the Arts and Historical Commission doesn't feel like it's in the position to do this. They'd rather have D removed, and then council could take it from there. They could amend it. They could say, no, please do it, or get another commission to do it, any number of things. Or you could say, we'll keep it as it is, but change the way you do. I mean, there's any number of approaches you could take. But really, it's just kind of an up or down. I think if you take ask council to take, because they would, of course, have to do the amendment, ask them to take letter D out, the requirement for a list, then they may alter the ordinance more, just to get that kind of definiteness for enforcement and notice purposes. But I don't speak for them. I couldn't have a crystal ball to tell you what they may do. But certainly you could say, all right, we're going to keep it as it is, and next time we'll start getting this list together, or we don't want to do it.
Is there a timeline? related to coming up with this?
No, I don't believe we have they did not set a time list that we had to, just that we were to take action. I think on the next action, if we were to keep the list, was to get public input.
There's no deadline.
Yeah, there was no deadline set.
No, there's only deadline would be if council, and I've not heard anything, if someone said, hey, where's the list, and, but I've not heard a word about that.
I have a couple of comments. So as far as the liability, I know that that was mentioned, and I do not think that that totally needs to be the overriding factor in consideration of keeping our motion that passed on the 14th of October. Now, as far as presenting our motion to council, perhaps it would do exactly what possibly maybe was not allowed in the beginning, would be the opportunity truthfully for some open conversation regarding this. I have seen no time limit. History in itself is constantly evolving. I've seen no specifications as to how often this supposed list would be updated, nor have I seen to whom this list would be presented to keep in safekeeping if an arresting officer was on a scene. How is he or she to know at that time that this is a historic marker or property? Just a lot of unanswered questions, and my initial thought is it was a futile attempt at government overreach, and it passed, and here we are. That's what I have to say.
And if I could just jump on one point, and it's your policy decision, however y'all want to approach it, but it would go back to the one question. It would go back to county council. They would incorporate the list into the ordinance, so it would become an ordinance, and that's a public record. That's how law enforcement would know. Periodic updating of it, I think makes a lot of sense, but there's nothing built into the ordinance that says, hey, you have to do this every 3 months. So it would be something that y'all would essentially monitor if you decided to go that route and say, hey, we've got 3 more, please incorporate that into the ordinance. But there was a lot of public input. I know council brought it up. My recollection was they brought it up at a law enforcement committee meeting a couple of times, asked me to draft the ordinance. Law enforcement passed it to council, and of course the council goes through the ordinance process, which is the 3 readings and a public hearing. That's pretty much the whole history of it.
I have a question, just because since we met last, one of our existing historical markers was accidentally damaged. It was mowing by the roadside that caused the damage, and they immediately brought it to me, and I worked with Luther to get it repaired. So I just kind of want to be sure I understand how this might factor into accidents, especially if we are looking at expensive stuff, and we may, even with an accident, be tagged with a pretty hefty bill for replacement and repair.
Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Chairwoman.
Yes.
My head's straight. This ordinance doesn't speak to replacement costs, so it's really just really a criminal ordinance. So it speaks to the penalty and perhaps incarceration. The accidental, of course, is a difficult term to define, but if I can think of a corollary, speeding, if you have a good reason to be speeding, your police officer is probably not going to ticket you for it. Saying that I just wasn't paying attention, negligent on some tier of negligence, you're going to get your ticket. If you're obviously had some mens rea, intentional criminal, thought behind it, you're going to get pegged harder. I can't say how the police are going to enforce it. I can't imagine that if somebody, inadvertently, hits one of the markers with their car or something, that the judge is going to lock them away.
So some amount of intent would be evaluated.
Certainly.
applying
Yeah,
this.
but that's nothing that any of us have a control over. That's when it switches over to the magistrate's office and the enforcing officer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So it seems like to me, the intent of this list is to help the law enforcement of the ordinance, and that they want to be able to quickly, in a time of, when they've received a call, to be able to go and just look at this list and know it is covered or it is not covered. Or to be able to say to someone, you are on a historical marker because it's on this, or a memorial because it's on this list, in case they are not aware. And therefore, then they can do the criminal enforcement if necessary, is how I see it, versus them calling into question and having a debate on the scene if it is or is not.
Madam Chair, if I could, and again, I don't want to divine what council's full intention was, but I think that, is certainly a notice and enforcement. So there is that third option. You say, hey, we don't want to make the list, let's get rid of D, would you, council? Or we'll go about making the list. Or if you have an idea of a different way to identify, as an alternative. Council, it's going to be hard, can't update the list, can't keep it current. It's difficult to track these things, or for whatever reason, we have this thought to make it, more clear who may be violating the laws, so they're not, everybody's on notice. It's just a third option to kick out.
So throwing it out there, though, since part of the ordinance to be on the list was that it had to be publicly owned.
Was on public property, but yes.
It's on public property.
Right.
So then is that not covered by existing ordinances and laws for protection because you are on someone else's property?
Yeah, there are a myriad of different laws cover whether it's public or private for these. There's specific laws dealing with cemeteries, there's specific laws dealing with historical markers from the state perspective. That was subject to some debate, and I think that may have been the genesis of this. We're going to have our local law because they're doing away with the element of the Heritage Act that protected monuments. That may have been the origin of it. But yes, without this, the police could, by trespass, conversion of property, damage some, I don't know all the criminal terms, I'm not a criminal attorney, but, damaging the public's property or damaging private property, you can enforce those. So I wouldn't say that if this were to go away, the police would have no remedy, if that's your question.
I have another what-if question.
Sure.
And sorry about that, but I think I'm hearing some of the concern is the worry about omitting some markers, because that's very possible. I just want to make sure I'm clear on what would happen, an arresting officer doesn't find it on the list. He's done his best job, but he doesn't find it on the list. And at that point, is it just sort of a legal loophole? That person gets off until we correct that issue and there's no retroactive anything to apply it?
Depending on the list. And so, yeah, so my thinking is, you can do it this way, and it would be probably a good way to do it. And this is the way I would do it, just because I'm just a lawyer thinking, is you develop your list and then you develop some catch-all categories, perhaps. All similar monuments, similar markers of this ilk or whatever, that narrows down from a very broad definition of this is a historic thing, based on what we think is historic and a thing. So that's one way to do it. Of course, council, you could send it back and ask council, hey, just make categories. Just do it that way, and that could be more definite. I'm not trying to make this more difficult by giving you more options, but there are a few different options, different ways you could approach it.
I mean, we did establish criteria that's a little bit broader that I think some of you at least said to me that, could be applied by a reasonable person in an enforcement position, but
Yeah, I mean, if that's, I haven't seen the criteria. Maybe, Phil, you gave this to me. I don't remember exactly what to say. I'm sorry. But if the criteria are something that could be incorporated, that could be. merged into the ordinances. You know, it's just really the purpose is, Madam Chair stated, it's notice to the public and ease enforcement for law enforcement.
So we don't have, the list of criteria.
I have an extra copy if you want to pass it.
Give me 1 second, I hid those slides because I wasn't using them, so give me 1 second and I'll try to pull those back up.
While we're waiting, is there other thoughts? Considerations? So I'll say my only concern with leaving the motion as it was voted and approved on is if we take it back to council, should they change and we didn't get, and I think that's part of Mr. Lombard's point, is that there was not any input by this commission in drafting the ordinance. It's all been an after fact. And yet if we send it back to council, then it's up to them to do how they see fit, and we might not like the second result either. So I'm just kind of, my mind is just kind of thinking all of the possibilities and trying to see what is the best, option for us.
Well, the political process sometimes takes time. And sometimes it takes back and forth. So if there's a sense of hurriedness, then I can understand why it may be of utmost concern that we move on and leave this as is. However, we are talking about an ordinance, which is a law. And from my point of view, sending it back, there is no real problem with that.
That's true. So up on the screen are the evaluation criteria that we had up with.
So you had two main criteria, one that it had to be located within the unincorporated boundary of the county, and then it must be on a publicly owned, operated, or controlled piece of property. Once those two base were set, then you had this list of evaluation criteria to fit it in, that you would make sure that it met at least one of those, if I'm
I
remember right.
think maybe.
Yeah, I think it had to meet.
It had to meet the first two.
Yes, and then one.
And then be tied to at least one of these, yeah. And it just provided us some criteria to base the list upon, which was drafted from the state ordinance. Leslie drafted that from the
This is from the National Register's.
From the National Register, okay.
Assessment for historicalness.
Right, with the National Register, I mean, it's a long, drawn-out process, is it not? I mean, it's not as simple as this group or he thinks that significant is important. I mean, it seems very, in my opinion, very subjective. I mean, the objectivity, to me, is not very evident.
Yep. I think that's why they usually involve big committees and groups of people to chime in about why it's significant, and make that argument on a case-by-case basis. So, yeah.
That's my point.
Yep.
Possibly a lot of conversation.
Probably, yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion or any any motion to change what we've already approved on? Hearing none, then I will say that this discussion is closed, and we will proceed with how our motion was approved on October 14th, which was to send it to council with the request to remove Section D. Okay. Our next item for discussion is the Mural Trail application.
We received one application since we met last. You know, we put together a process that someone can turn in an application. I have that in your packet for you. It's from the city of Seneca, and it's for the, I believe it's 12 murals that are across the Norton Thompson Park overhang. What's the word I'm looking for there? Boardwalk, whatever, where they have the, there in Norton Thompson Park. But there's a request to add those to the mural trail. The description is on the back of that piece of paper. You know, the purpose of the application was for you to be aware of what murals were coming in and allow us to read those descriptions. This is a little more than 500 characters, so we'll have to pare it down a little bit to fit it in. But it's for your consideration to add once you approve. If you approve, then we would get this over and get it added to the mural trail on the website. We would get back with the photographer and have them go, you know, photograph that mural and get those images over to our Visit Oconee staff to get it uploaded onto the site. So that's kind of how the process would work as those applications come in. And I expect, just from communication, that we'll have a couple of these over the next couple of months. I know there's some more being worked on, and I expect you guys to see more applications, which is why we did it. We wanted to bring awareness to it and keep adding to that piece of the website. So this is for your consideration tonight, to add the Ramcat Alley Cats to your mural trail. Yes, ma'am.
A motion to add them. I think that's.
I saw those a while back, I didn't know if they were gonna be permanently there, or, so they're a permanent fixture.
I would think so.
I just have one clarifying question. Will there be one QR code, or will there be one for each of the 12?
We would probably do one QR code for all of them, and it would go to the same spot on the website. Now, from a photography standpoint, once you get to that point, he's probably gonna have all 12 of them there that you make a click on and it becomes bigger. But I think you're probably gonna have one QR code for this mural, and then as you click on it, you can see the different drawings. Because I think the front is an interpretation and a poem of the book, and then the back is a drawing of the original cat.
Oh, yeah, I second it, I mean, it's well done.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Who was the second, I'm sorry? Ben?
Okay, then all in favor of approving this application?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Speaking of the,
Just gonna leave.
the mural, the mural, I did have a question about the,
Thank you, Mr. Root.
Absolutely. Thank you all for
Yeah,
all that
thank
you do. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but March 1st would be the earliest it would be on the council agenda. That's up to council chair and the administrative council as a whole, but that'll be the earliest. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
the mural across that has the big locomotive train, across at the corner, across from Kiwi Brewing.
Mhm.
That one is on our list.
Yes.
Is there a code? Is there?
Yes. Should be.
Okay.
I will double check.
I-
Because I know the city, if you'll look, the city actually they did little metal plates to go behind the sticker. And they
Okay,
put them up. I paid attention to the ones I was driving around. I hadn't specifically put my eyes on that one.
Okay.
So I'll double check and make sure. But yes, it was included originally.
I just wanted, I thought so, and I didn't know when they actually went in to get it installed, but and I haven't checked in a while, but just wanted to double check. Next item is the FY22 planning, where we are now in February and we have our budget to spend for this fiscal year, which ends on June 30th. So we don't have a whole lot of time, but it looks like we have an item to consider, Keene Creek Historical Marker.
Yes, so we are running out of time to do some planning. And our park staff at South Cove reached out and wanted to do a historical marker for Keene Creek. And I'm gonna let you just kind of take it, run with it from here, because I'm not a historian and I don't claim to be. So,
Yeah, I think Stephen at South Cove reached out to me and said they've been working on beefing up interpretation about the park and the property and the site there. So this was something that fell in his purview. So under the lake there at South Cove would have been the historical site of Keene Creek Town, so a very historic Cherokee villager town. And so I just put together some preliminary kind of suggested interpretation that you'll see on the back of that application form. Basically, stating that it was there and some highlights about what, its history there. It was affected by the Cherokee War of 1776. It's tied to Andre Michaud, who's kind of noted for documenting, not discovering, documenting the Oconee Bell, which is a big part of our natural history here in Oconee County. And I've left some room here just because if the state committee person that reviews these historical marker applications down the line feels that that's a little bit too light, that we also have an avenue to explore further about adding some additional interpretation that would explain the site's role as a historic bounty land, which is something that we don't currently interpret anywhere else in the county. If you're familiar with that, basically, land was awarded to soldiers after the American Revolution as payment sort of for their service. So, and that area is typically called bounty land here in the county as a community, so it has kind of stuck. So that's just an option in case I get that feedback, but I'm still working on that research part of that. So, is that covered? Okay.
yeah, so as you think about how you want to spend your money, we wanted to throw in a historical marker for consideration. That she's still doing research, it's not complete. And then, of course, you may have other items you want to do in terms of, to get us through June 30th. That's up for this commission to determine. So, we do have another application for a historical marker that came in today, and so you'll see it on the March meeting for consideration. So we'll go through and do the research on that. I'm going to meet with them. Josh is here with the Agricultural Museum, so I'll meet with them, go through that application, and so that'll come to you in March. So I know you're going to have two applications to consider as part of your, consideration for this time, and they're about $3,000 a piece right now.
That definitely will cover it. I hope.
Between, $2,750 to $3,000 a piece for those markers. So if you considered both of those, then you certainly could use a good chunk of that money now.
And,
And then any other items that you may want to consider.
right, and I think we've said there's, 7,500, is that
Yeah,
correct?
the allotment is $7,500 a year. The only thing right now that would come out of there, I would pay the photographer a small fee to go out and do the murals. That's usually a couple $100, depending on, you know, how much time they spend doing their photography and getting everything set up. So you're probably looking at still having $7,250, $7,300 available for allotment, for planning.
This is for the fiscal year ending in June.
June 30th.
Right,
And then,
And we don't have to have these complete, but if you voted on them, we've got to have them.
come in.
We got to have them, you know, a purchase order in place to identify the money before June 30th. We don't have to order, because I don't think we could even start now and have them here by June 30th, the way
No.
time's going for this process. But if you chose to go that route, we would begin, do the research, get the language in place, get it sent to the state for review. They would possibly leave some back and forth on what that looks like, the final draft of the language, before it's approved to even order the marker. So you know, if you choose to go either, you know, with one or both of those, as long as we got it encumbered into a purchase order by June 30th, then it secures the money.
But can I ask a question? Maybe not specifically, but in the event, if in conversation, if this came up with someone in the public, where are these applications found?
So you guys just approved this, so we haven't added it to the website yet. I will work on getting that added. Right now, they can call me and I will email it to them.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, that's what we did with the application for next month, is I emailed it to them, they filled it out and sent it back.
Sure, okay, thank you.
And I think while we're checking the Mural Trail application,
The Mural Trail application, it's not on there either right now, is it?
I think while we're checking, let's just.
Yeah,
double
we'll get them
check.
both, we'll get them both in place on the Arts and Historical page.
And if we were to earmark, so what's going through my mind, and I guess I'll open up the floor for discussion for our planning conversation, is if we earmarked, you know, tentatively the one or both of these markers, estimating $6,000, what happens since we're crossing fiscal years possibly if the state says it's not? I mean,
So we would know in time, like, there's enough time to get the language together, to get the language sent and reviewed. You just probably don't have enough time to get the sign ordered and received. So I think you got enough time to get
I would
the
hope so.
language
the ball
sent in
rolling enough to know.
to archives, reviewed and approved, and then you'll know that prior to.
So I think what I'm hearing is if we chose to go and to support the markers, we really shouldn't be planning any other large item project, but knowing that it could be, if the state denies it or it's deemed not meeting the criteria, then at the end, we could have more money back in the budget that,
We could, and in a situation like that, we would just need to work with our county and determine how best to utilize those funds at that point in time. I don't think it's imperative that you have a plan B right now, but as we get the draft language sent in, we'll know pretty quick whether we're on the right track, and we just need to tweak it a little bit, or if it's good, or if it's this is not gonna qualify, and I haven't heard any input that this would not qualify at this point.
this will be inside the park area.
Yeah, we would put it inside the park. Not sure exactly where. Probably somewhere near the office, because you're looking out across the lake.
so, opening, again, any other thoughts for our project? So if we were to earmark the estimated $3,000, we'd have roughly $1,000 remaining. Or to not, I mean, I don't know if anybody would not want to support the marker efforts. I think it's a great thing.
We didn't have anything pressing on the list
Right.
that was, you know, this is what we need to do, this is what we're ready to do. Nothing was shovel-ready, and so that's why we wanted to help. You know, bring a project that would be worthy of that. And then, of course, you got a second application today that may, you know, you can review next month. So, it's opportunities there to utilize it.
And this is just a first one. I mean, the next one could possibly just be planned for the following
Yeah, I mean,
fiscal
it's-
year, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're only considering one right now. The next application will be next month.
I like it. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else out there that even talks about this Cherokee Town.
Leslie's working hard to research it. so.
I'm
There,
intrigued.
there's, I will say, there's not just oodles of information about that particular town. That's why I wanted to prepare a little backup interpretation, just in case they felt, because what you can do on those signs is either have two sides duplicating each other, so the same thing on both sides, or sometimes like what we did with Hillbilly Day and Mountain Rest Community Club, different sides, different topics. So, yeah, it's kind of options they can be ready for.
A question. Okay, I've seen on some signs in various locations, if you will, for instance, we're using this one as an example, beneath the waters of Lake Kiowee. Then there may be like a little blip, if you will, directly to the west from current location or such,
Right.
just to kind of give folks strictly an
Yeah.
idea,
Yeah.
because
that's
that's a
something I'll
wide
need to-
body of water there. Part-
Yes.
Right, is that part of your research?
Well, I think once we know more about where exactly they want to put it in
Uh-huh.
the park, we can add a directional cue to
Yeah,
it.
that would be nice, just to kind of point folks in that direction.
Do we need to make at this time a motion for you to continue, or
I would want a motion on the marker that's in front of you, so that we know that we're pressing the gas and, kind of making sure all of our research is correct, and we go ahead and get that sent in. And then the next one will come to you next month.
And are you still willing for the park to pay for the application fee, or would that want to come out of their budget?
Could that be covered, is 3,000 enough to cover that?
Probably. You might
So
wanna
there is
double
it
check,
250?
but
There's a $250 application fee to send it to the state. I'm including that in, because I think the last ones we ordered were about $27.50. And then that would include that money going to the state for the application process as well. That way you don't require the applicant to pay the $250, we just include that as part of the fee. That was my thoughts, unless you wanted to do it different.
well, I'm intrigued by it, so I will go ahead and put the motion on the table to approve the application for this historical mobile. That would include the application
Yeah,
fee.
I second it. I don't know that we have really any other Cherokee markers around. Do
We
we?
have quite a few for other villages and towns.
We do?
Mhm.
In this county?
Yep. This commission in years prior has done quite a few.
The one that was Baroque is Chogatown?
Joy.
Which one?
Joy?
The one that,
we
the sign
repaired.
that broke,
I think it was,
was it Chogatown?
no, maybe it was Joy.
EJ.
No.
We did one for EJ.
We're asking the one that was broken most recently.
Oh, that was Chalta.
Chalk.
Yeah, Chogatown.
Yeah, we're currently doing one for another Cherokee village at EJ. And you're right on the money with the state charges.
Yeah.
Anytime y'all wanna see a list or something that would
You want me-
identify
Yeah.
those,
Do you want me to bring the list next month?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion at this time? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. So I guess if there's any other planning ideas, or do we just want to say, I'm not sure how we feel about planning at this point, if we still have some discussion. I want to give the opportunity for anybody.
For such. And if any planning for this year, it needs to most likely revolve around perhaps $1,500.
Yeah, and I think just from timing standpoint, March at the latest, April, to allow me to
Take some action.
implement. So we've got the one coming next month, and then, you know, if there's anything else, you know, you've got a month to think. You've probably got $1,000 there. And we as a staff can kind of put our heads together as well and maybe bring some thoughts back to you about the best ways to utilize that.
Okay. I just want to make sure, since it's been on the agenda every month for planning, and I just want to make sure that we give an opportunity if there's any other ideas out there. I will be honest, I speak with people, I ask for ideas, and it's hard to come up, but I also want us to be open and share all ideas and consider ideas, so. Hearing no further discussion, we'll close that item. Our next meeting is March 10th.
March the 10th. The only thing I'll add is we do currently have 2 vacancies on the commission still. We have an at-large position as well as District 3, which is the Seneca area. You know, anyone who lives in those District 3, or anyone that wants to fill that at-large seat, they would need to fill out the questionnaire and get it to the clerk, council clerk. I've talked with several people, but no applications have been turned in as of this week. So, they won't, until they get the application filled out and turned in, it can't go to council for consideration. So, but appreciate your time and service, and if you know of anybody and they have questions, feel free to call me, and I'll
I
be
know
glad
that
to.
the person that, from Seneca, that was gonna fill the seat, he had a death in the family, so he's probably distracted. But it sounded like he was interested, so.
I've talked to 3 different people in the Seneca area, who are thinking about it. So, I think it's just a matter of time, we'll have some applications come forth.
Okay. With that, if there is a motion to adjourn,
I so move.
Can I ask a question? Anyway, a couple of months ago, we talked about the 250th commission. I was wondering if anybody had actually applied for the state grant and actually established a 250 celebration committee, American committee for historical events in this country, in this county. If not, we're a little bit behind. Certainly, this is a small county, but Lawrence County, for instance, has established a commission, and they're spending $633,000 to upgrade their historical sites. Cherokee County, which of course has 3 national Revolutionary battlefields in their county, and the only county in the state that does that, just got a grant for $1.2 million to build a military museum for that county. So I was wondering if this county has yet applied for the 250 America grant to establish a 250 America celebration.
Can you give me more information on
We
that?
have.
The short answer to that is no.
Okay.
And at this point, we would need to put that on the next month's agenda, so that it's put on the agenda, made public,
Okay,
and brought for discussion.
thank you.
But no, the short answer is no. Is that something you guys would like me to add to next month's?
yes, we'll add
Two.
it to, under planning, maybe,
Okay.
for potential. So we had a motion to adjourn and, by Ernie, and I will second it, and